Hello, dear audience. Welcome back to another episode, where today we'll deep dive into South Korea's catastrophe-level economic situation. Yes, you heard it right, catastrophe. Because when politics, monetary policy, and a crashing stock market converge, there's no better term for it. Right now, South Korea's economic landscape is bearing the brunt of unprecedented turmoil. You know, we all love to just sip tea while watching democracy thrive and economies boom, but unfortunately, for South Koreans, that's just a distant dream. The once vibrant Asian tiger has been clawed by its worst political crisis in decades, alongside mounting economic challenges that feel like an avalanche coming down on the country's financial stability. So today, we'll look at the brain-melting intricacies of why everything seems to be going completely south, pun intended, for South Korea's economy and how events political and unexpected are painting a bleak picture for 2025. Hold tight, this is a roller coaster ride through bad news, and perhaps you'll feel a mix of disbelief and frustration, much like most South Koreans right now. Let's start by looking at the political mess surrounding South Korea, a major catalyst dragging the economy into the ground. All eyes are pointed at a monumental event, the impeachment. Yes, you read that correctly. President Yoon Suk-yeol was impeached after a brief, and mind you, controversial, imposition of martial law last year. This is akin to throwing kerosene on already flammable political tensions. What's worse, martial law historically doesn't sit well with people. It simultaneously inflames public anger, cracks open fissures in governance systems, and sends international markets and observers into panic mode. So, what happens next? The economy bleeds. I couldn't make this up if I tried, folks. This political nightmare is the bedrock of public unrest, chaos in parliament, plummeting investor confidence, and voila, financial dysfunction follows suit. With a leadership vacuum looming ominously, the Bank of Korea, BOK, has been thrust into the impossible task of trying to quickly rescue the economy through what we'll call macroeconomic gymnastics, aka monetary policy. But as BOK Governor Ri Chang-yong himself pointed out, this mess is far too big to be fixed solely with monetary tinkering. Now, let's talk about interest rates because they play a critical role here. Governor Ri warned that continuing rate cuts could become a source of anxiety. Who would have thought that monetary easing, a move usually aimed at boosting the economy, could backfire? If interest rates drop too fast and too deep, it often pushes a country standing on already shaky ground straight into the quicksand of inflation, currency depreciation, and lower foreign investment. Governor Ri's remarks underline a growing fear cutting rates isn't working anymore. Let that sink in. He's essentially saying that the bank has shot every bullet it had to stimulate the economy, and now they're out of ammunition. South Korea's central bank had already enacted 2 consecutive rate cuts towards the end of last year in hopes of stabilizing the economy. But what happened instead? The exact opposite. The stock market tanked, the South Korean won slumped to its weakest point since 2009, and the so-called back-to-back rate cuts turned into band-aids on a gaping wound that required surgical intervention. Here's the data. As of December 2024, even after those emergency rate cuts, the South Korean won depreciated by more than 20% against the US dollar, crashing through the levels only seen during the global financial crisis. Additionally, South Korea's stock market plummeted nearly 15% in the last 6 months, and the broader Kospi index, a benchmark of the South Korean stock market, dipped to its lowest levels in 5 years. Foreign investors have basically packed their bags and left town. Wow. They've lost confidence in the entire country's governance and financial prospects amidst ever-growing uncertainty. But wait, this isn't some abstract economic theory. Inflation is also clawing hard at the middle and lower classes. With imports getting more expensive due to a weaker won, everyday essentials like food, fuel, and even household goods have jumped in price. South Korea now faces rising inflation rates nearing 4% as of the latest data in December 2024, well above the central bank's 2% target. So, Governor Ri asking for flexibility regarding the pace of rate cuts is akin to admitting that the central bank doesn't even know what to do next without sinking the economy further into inflation and currency devaluation. Bear in mind that this is happening amid the ongoing global interest rate hike cycle, largely led by the US Federal Reserve and other G7 central banks, who are reluctant to ease monetary conditions in a globally inflationary environment. But monetary policy tools aren't even the worst of it. Just when you thought things couldn't get more chaotic, the Jeju airplane crash this past weekend has sent an already shivering consumer sentiment straight into Arctic freeze. I know what you're thinking, what does a plane crash have to do with economics? Well, in a normal scenario maybe not much, but in South Korea's highly emotional public sphere, a national tragedy can have a wide-reaching effect on consumer sentiment, especially when the scales are so delicately tipped. Consumer confidence is already sensitive, particularly when the country's economy is facing freefall. The last thing South Korean citizens needed was a reminder of vulnerability brought by tragic accidents against a backdrop of political incompetence. Add that to growing fear about rent, jobs, and inflation and you've got the perfect storm to tank domestic consumption even further. The government here needs to act quickly to restore consumer confidence. Data shows a dreaded drop of 7% in consumer confidence for the quarter following national tragedies in Korea's recent history. After the Sewol ferry disaster in 2014, we saw a massive plunge in retail sales which took well over a year to recover. Now pile that on top of today's political instability, it's likely we can expect recurring panics, weaker retail performances, and continuous drag on GDP growth. Merry Christmas. Hardly. Then there's that wild card Donald Trump, who's set to return to the White House this year, and as always, who really knows what that means for US-South Korea relations and the global economy at large. In Trump's first term, the USA frequently ramped up protectionist trade policies that strained South Korea. Now with the possibility of those policies coming back perhaps even on steroids, South Korea has a thorny path ahead in global trade negotiations. South Korea's technology and automobile sectors, heavily dependent on exports, could suffer major disruptions if Trump turns up the heat on tariffs and continues to pull America further inward in terms of international cooperation. After all, South Korea's highly export-oriented economy counts on good relations with the US for everything from semiconductors to automobile exports. Guess what? The US doesn't appear very friendly anymore if Trump gets serious about his isolationist policies once again. The ultimate takeaway here is that South Korea's macroeconomic troubles aren't just theoretical anymore. They're pounding right on public doors. South Korea faces a quadruple threat. 1. Political disruption choking the life out of investor confidence. 2. Monetary policy failures with interest rates seemingly losing effect. 3. External trade risks poised to shock the economy, especially with uncertainty surrounding Trump's return. 4. Weakened consumer sentiment, caused by national disasters and class inequalities. Without decisive leadership to pull this economic car out of what looks like an increasingly steep ditch, South Korea may be heading for a recession of monumental proportions. The data doesn't lie. Inflation nearing 4%, the one hitting fresh record lows, sharp declines in consumer confidence, and a looming external trade war narrative feel like a toxic cocktail no economy wants to drink. From the high-rises of Seoul to small businesses in Incheon, anxiety is seeping into every corner of society. Estate agents are reporting that South Korea's real estate frenzy is on the verge of a collapse, leaving the government little room for maneuvering. At the same time, labor strikes are on the rise due to skyrocketing living costs. South Korea's working class is feeling the heat, and they're starting to bring it to the streets. The leadership vacuum at the highest levels of government is the core of the problem here, ladies and gentlemen. With President Yoon impeached and a new, uncertain political chapter on the horizon, even the historically mighty Bok finds its hands tied. You can tinker with the interest rates all you want, but monetary policy can only work effectively if the broader economic conditions are well functioning. So, what can South Korea do? Radical reforms are needed, but reality suggests they aren't coming soon enough. A strong pivot towards restoring investor confidence is crucial, but that requires a stable political environment Korea no longer has. The next step should involve addressing the negotiation stance South Korea will take regarding Trump's anticipated economic policies because, honestly, external threat management might be one of the few levers left to pull. Bottom line. Without addressing the unstable leadership, calming domestic nerves, and bridging policy gaps that have left wide chasms between government and citizens, South Korea could be facing a prolonged economic winter. The clocks are ticking for the officials in Seoul, and unfortunately, they're running out of time. Catch up in the next episode where we'll continue diving into this juicy turmoil in global financial markets.